Hello and welcome. My name is Tatiana, and today we're joined by Julie Satow, an award-winning journalist, New York Times bestseller author. Her latest book, When Women Ran Fifth Avenue, takes us inside the golden age of American department stores and how women led them all. Julie, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So I just want to dive a little bit into the book. What inspired you to write this book? What inspired you to pivot to this specific content?
Well, I always love New York, you know. I feel like New York is kind of a character in both my books. You know, it's my hometown.
Yeah.
So, my first book was about, you know, a historic hotel, about the Plaza Hotel, and kind of a history of New York told through the hotel. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to do something kind of, you know, like grow from that. So my book agent was like, oh, you should do department stores. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, but she wanted store wars is what she said. So like, you know, a battle of two stores.
Yeah.
And I was like, ugh, I just want to write about people, you know, preferably women.
Yeah.
So around that time, two of the big department stores closed, just like within a few weeks of each other, both Lord & Taylor and Henry Bendel's. And there was a New York Times article about the closing of the two stores. And in it, they mentioned these two women I'd never heard of, Dorothy Shaver and Geraldine Stutz. And I just kind of started investigating who these women were, and they were just so amazing, and their stories were so compelling. Yeah. And their biographies had never been written before. And as I was researching, I found another woman, Hortense Odlum, and you know, in journalism, you say like 3 is a charm, yes. 3 is a trend. So when I found all 3 of them, I felt like, oh, it was such a beautiful history of the 20th century and the history of the department store, and their lives were so interesting. So I was like, oh, I have my book.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for giving us that insight. So another question for you, right? So being a woman in life overall is very, very pivotal. And being in leadership is also pivotal too, right? So like Dorothy Shaver, she basically pushed for American designers and she reshaped the shopping experience for everyone. How do you think that made things for women like us today that want to be in retail?
Yeah, she, I think, is a real pioneer. And, you know, it makes me sad that she's not better known because she was such an important figure. We really have American designers because of Dorothy in many ways. Right. In the 1930s, back then, like, only designers had to be French. Like, it was only in Paris where there was design. You know, it was like Dior, Chanel, that was what people thought of as fashion design. And here in New York, actually, we had the garment district, and they just made cheap knockoffs, cheap dresses. Yeah. And Dorothy was the first one to say, you know, there are real fashion designers in America that are, you know, really making the kind of clothes that we American women want. And so she started putting their names on advertising, like Claire McCardell, for instance, or some of these early designers. Yeah. And it really started the American fashion industry. And it was an amazing idea. And obviously, like, basically it was sportwear. You know, if you've ever worn leggings, I like to say, that's basically like, you know, American fashion. That was kind
leggings.
of her thing. Who doesn't?
Yeah.
So, you know, she was really a pioneer. So I feel like, you know, I think women today can, by learning who their foremothers are, if you will, especially if you're interested in the fashion industry or in retail, learning who these pioneers were, I think, are so important. I mean, we learn about American history, you know, presidents, whatever. It's really the same thing. Understanding where we came from, I think, is important.
Absolutely. I never thought about it like that, like founding mothers, kind of like we always talk about men with the founding fathers.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that that's a great like analogy to think about, especially if you're thinking about this book in retail.
Yeah, well, I always say like, oh, men ruled, like the men's names were on the buildings. Like you've heard of like Bloomingdale's or Neiman Marcus. Those are actual, you know, men's names. Yeah. But inside the stores, it was the women who ruled.
Absolutely,
you know?
Right. But we're back in it though. We're gonna do it. So we had the opportunity to do it in an event with you today, and I was actually with you as well. And we have a picture here for the event. How did you feel at this event? Like, what inspired you to come to KBCC and to some of our students?
Well, Michael reached out to me. He really enjoyed the book, and he invited me. And, you know, I really, you work so long on a book. I was telling Michael this, that, you know, by yourself, you never know if anyone's going to read it.
Right.
So hearing from someone that read it and really enjoyed it, like, I always want to connect with the readers.
Right.
So I said I really wanted to come, and it was actually really inspiring. I have to say, today has been amazing. That was such a fun event. I normally give like a talk, a prepared talk, and I didn't give it this time. We just kind of like talked off the cuff.
Right.
So it was a little nervous, but everyone was so nice and warm, and I felt like, you know, I just, it was so cool to talk to all these students. I don't usually get to talk to young people that are currently wanting to be in the industry and stuff. So
you're young too, stop.
Not as young as you, but thanks.
No problem. So thank you for that as well. So when discovering some of the information about this book and doing your research, what were some of the things that were surprising to you that caught you off guard?
Yeah, well, in general, I never thought of department stores as being these female universes. I didn't know that. You know, you always think of, okay, saleswomen or something, and they're usually women, not men. But actually, up and down the ranks, women were in charge, you know, from buyers to saleswomen to back of the store, whatever, you know, executive roles, accounting. So that was really surprising. Like, I found this photo from a store from 1906, and they had their accounting department. It was a photo of the accounting department, and every single person in the accounting department was a woman.
Wow.
Which, you know, you just wouldn't think of, you know. Or I found a story about this buyer from 1917 who was in her 20s, and she was trying to urge other women to get jobs at department stores. She was saying, look, I grew up in a tenement in San Francisco, and I had no money, and I'm now in my 20s. This is 1917, and I'm traveling to Paris to go by myself, to go to fashion shows. I'm earning so much money. I've moved my family out of the tenement into a house across the bay. So that kind of stuff was just shocking and amazing.
Inspiring. Wow, she was trying to create a community for herself, you know, of other women. And I absolutely love that.
Back then, 1970, I mean, you think about women only had the right to, this is before women even had the right to vote, you know, so.
Yeah, very pivotal moments, like changing history, literally. So department stores are often seen as places where women could find like independence and leadership opportunities. How important was that in the like mid-20th century? And basically, how did these women pay for like the future, like someone like me that also wants to be in retail and wants to like get myself into those big doors?
Yeah, I think, you know, they were so busy trying to break their own glass ceilings. I don't really know how much they realized that they were paving the way. I did find like a letter that there's been very few women who are presidents of department stores, but I did find there was this woman, Mildred Custon, who was president of Bonwit Teller much later in the 1970s, much later after Hortense, who's in my book, was the president. And she wrote a letter to Dorothy Shaver, who was then the president of Lord & Taylor, saying what an inspiration she was to her and how she, you know, always looked up to her. And she was so excited when she got this job because she felt like, you know, she was paying it, you know, that she'd really, you know, was following in Dorothy's footsteps. So I think, you know, there was some acknowledgement, but they were also just really struggling themselves, you know? So I think we have to all put it into context, you know? They weren't thinking, you know, next generation. They were like, I just really need to make my own living and try to make a difference. You know?
Absolutely. So, and I really think that that's something that's very important for like someone like me or others, like other women that are interested in the retail world, to learn and know. Like I spoke about at the event, like this is more so of a textbook to me than, you know, just a book like that you can buy like or get from a library. You know, it's like giving you the real inside scoop as to how things started and how we got here and how we could keep going. So thank you for that. For those who haven't read When Women Ran Fifth Avenue, what do you hope to what do you hope they take away from it, and especially with the lasting impact of women on in business and fashion today?
I feel like, you know, there's not a lot of stories about business women, honestly. There's a lot of stories about businessmen, a lot of biographies and stuff. There isn't, you know, and I think women, we have to see ourselves as business women. I mean, I'm a writer, I'm not a businesswoman, but actually I kind of have a business,
I
you
think
know?
you're a businesswoman.
Right, like we kind of all have businesses, whatever we're doing, you know? It's so applicable to all of us, you know? I have to hustle, I have to do talks, I have to, you know, do events or whatever, I have to think about marketing. So all that stuff applies to me too. So I hope people take away like that they're not alone, that, you know, like that it was even harder back then than it is for us today.
Absolutely.
And, you know, give you that sense of history, that long sense of history. You know, I knew like about the 1970s and 80s and stuff, but I did not know about the 1910s. So, you know, learning about all of that, what it was like.
It's
know,
like returning to school for yourself, you know, but actually getting like inside scoop and learning more about history and being able to like do something for yourself too, and be a part of something like historical. You know,
I have the best job.
Yes, I think you do
love my
too.
job.
And you have a great personality. I think that
you.
the way that you articulate your words have been really, really great. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing in this incredible story. For those who are watching, you can find When Women Ran Fifth Avenue wherever books are sold.